Wow, what a great introduction. Couple of things. One, you got to be as old as me and Jim Brown to appreciate this slide. Back in the early days of black and white television, if the station wasn't broadcasting, they broadcasted this so you knew you were on the right station. So, and then I put the Little Rock Marathon logo thing up at the top, so I thought that was pretty cool. And it all fit on the slide, so that was even better. So anyway, I just stuck it up there because I thought it was pretty fancy. We're going to talk about injury prevention. So, and I got to tell you, this is like one of the driest PowerPoints you're ever going to see in your entire life. They don't have lots of flashy stuff, and there's a lot of stuff to read, and I'm going to try really hard not to read it. So, but it's got a lot of information, and I won't be mad if you do read it. So, the first point that I wanted to make about injury prevention is start with like the end in mind. If you're gonna do one of the races, and it doesn't matter whether it's the marathon or the 5K or anything in between, you should go see your doctor and get a physical. Go make sure it's okay for you to come play with us. And especially if you're over 40 and been couch potatoing for a long time, it's like really not a good plan to come out here and decide you're gonna run about 10 miles on your first visit. So, not that it hasn't been done, but anyway, First things first, I recommend that you do that. The other thing that I wanted to remind you about from this slide is if you don't have a doctor, a GP, whatever, this is a really great time in your life to acquire one. Go out and get a relationship with a doctor, because I promise you sooner or later he and you or she and you are going to become friends and you're going to become acquainted. So picking one that you like is kind of important, instead of taking the one that fate gives you when you happen to come in with your arm hanging off, or your leg, or you're carrying your leg over your shoulder or something like that. So that was the other thing I wanted to say about that. Now, I want to let you know that I'm not a doctor. I'm not talking to you about injury prevention from the time I was a doctor, but I did stay in the Holiday Inn Express last weekend, so I know a little bit, okay? Now, what about running injuries? I wanted to start with this slide because I think it's an eye-opener. If you look around you, statistically, only 4 out of every 10 people in the room will make it to the start line for this year's marathon or half marathon. Now, that doesn't mean that only 6 or 8 people out of this room are going to be there, but if you take the whole training group, more than half of them won't make it to the start line because they'll get injured. That's a lot. That's a pretty high ratio of folks getting hurt. So that's why we only get 3 or 4 chances to talk to y'all, and why we think it's really important to talk about injury prevention right up in the early part of the training, is because it's a big part of what happens, and it's a really big part of Hobbit and my plan on making sure that this doesn't happen to you. Notice this deal. The 60% of those injuries are going to be due to training errors. It's not going to be something that you were born with. It's not going to be the wrong shoes or something like that. Training errors are going to come in the form of prolonged or sudden increases in mileage and not enough recovery time. And essentially, I boil that down a whole lot more. You're just going to decide, for whatever reason, you're going to ignore whatever Hobbit tells you or whatever I tell you, especially in the form of a schedule, and decide that something else is better, like that you read on the wall in the restroom or something like that would probably be a better training plan, and it's going to get you hurt. I don't know any type A people, but I've heard that type A people tend to be in the high end of the percentage of folks that like to do this, that like to run, and they like to be competitive, and they want to run faster and jump higher and do that. And believe me, if you're a type A person, you're in the high percentage of the 65% that are going to get hurt this year. It's just part of it. Because speaking for a type A person, since I am one, I can tell you, we all want to do that. We all want to be faster, we want to run farther, we want something that's going to drive us, and since we are driven, what ends up happening is we're driven to injury. Sorry. All these words up here kind of boil down into a thing that says the more you train and the less repair time you have, the higher the incidence is that you're going to get hurt. So if you run 5 days a week, you're going to have a higher likelihood of getting hurt than if you run 3 days a week. and that if your schedule says you need to run more than 40 miles a week, it's happening. You're going to get hurt. It's just going to be the degree, how soon, whatever. When you look at the schedules, and Hobbit wrote the schedule that y'all are training on. If you're training on a half marathon or a marathon schedule or the 5 or 10K, whatever it is, Hobbit was the author of those schedules. And the things that I'm talking about here were way up in front of her mind about what should we do, how should we do this, what's the risk-reward ratio between how far can I push you as an athlete without breaking you and without hurting you, because I got to get you ready. I got to do it in 20 weeks so that you can start and have a good chance of finishing and finish strong and be happy, and with any luck, come back next year. Whether you come back with us or whether you decide to go kayak or become an adventure racer, if I can keep you off the couch again next year, I win. Whether you play with us again or not, that's up to you. I win either way. If you go back to being a couch potato because we hurt you or you hated doing this, we lose, straight up. So as you're thinking about this slide and thinking about what I'm talking about here, we're kind of the guardian of that. If you'll do what we said, you won't run into this slide. It won't be an issue for you, okay? This slide talks about the terrible twos. Too much, too soon, and it's not on my slide, but it's my very favorite, and that's too fast. The things that get you hurt tend to be these twos. Not following the schedule because I thought I needed to go farther, or I needed to do 2 long runs, or I needed to do more, so I jumped into the middle of the schedule because I know I'm really way more fit than what this schedule says, and we really should be on week 2, but I'm running ahead on week 6, too soon. And like I said, my very favorite is too fast. If this is your first marathon or half marathon or 5K or 10K, but for sure if you're running marathon distance or half marathon distance, speed work is not words that should be in your vocabulary. The nature of training for a long distance event, you will get faster because you'll get fitter. Did I say that okay? Fitter? You'll be stronger. Aerobically, you'll be better. Your endurance will be better. You'll be more adapted and more suited to being out and being the time on your feet, being able to stay upright. All the things that happen because of training, I promise you, you'll get faster. And if you run a marathon a year for the next 4 or 5 years with the same amount of training, you'll get faster every year, just because you'll get progressively fitter. Now, there are lots of folks that do speed work, and there's a place in marathon training for speed work and half marathon training for speed work, but particularly if this is your first time, it has no place. And I can tell you that the risk of speed work against the reward that you're likely to get, the view ain't worth the climb. If you want to be a little faster, then we'll work with doing what you need to do and running with the schedule that we have. And I'm going to tell you that over the 20 weeks, you're going to get stronger, and you're going to see yourself get faster from the first 6-mile run that you ran all the way down to the very last run that we do before the marathon is 6 miles. I'll bet you. Run the program, do what we ask. I'll bet you'll be faster the second 6 than you were the first 6. The other thing that this slide's got on it is it talks about 50% of running injuries that require time off, and that's only injuries that count are the ones where you can't play, right? You can't play. They're re-injuries, so when you're injured, you need to know as an athlete, why am I injured? And then you need to do something about the cause and not just treat the symptoms. If you've got shin splints really bad and you get to the point, shin splints become something you can't train with. I did that one time, and I spent about, was it 8 weeks, Hobbit? It seemed like 8 years, but I think it was 8 weeks in a boot. It was long enough that when they took the boot off, I have pretty big calves as far as my legs have pretty good definition, and I have pretty strong calves. The one on the left that wasn't injured was its normal size, about like that, and the other one looked about like my arm. I'd been in the boot so long. And I did about 6 weeks of rehab, and they got, and it came back. I mean, it was fine, but being immobilized for that long, the muscle just atrophied, and I was really, in fact, I was practically terrified at how fast it did it. It was just unbelievable. What hurt my shin and ultimately resulted in a thing called periostitis, Hubbard called it the periwinkle problem. I had a periwinkle problem in my leg, was overuse and overtraining and doing too much too soon. And the only way to not have that happen again was to get out of that behavior. That's what this is talking about here when it says treat the cause. I had to get my head right and stop doing what I was doing to not be back in that place. And I have a saying, I didn't put it in this deal, but my saying about being hurt sucks because you don't get to play. And anybody in the room that's been hurt and didn't get to come play will tell you in a heartbeat, it was no fun. And the people that live with you will tell you, you're no fun. Okay? Again, this is a really good slide if you're trying to build your own schedule or trying to validate a schedule or something like that. Hobbitt's already taken these bullets into account. She's not increasing your mileage by more than 10% a week. She's going about 3 weeks and then backing you up or staying steady for a week to 2 weeks. She's already doing that. It's already built in the schedule. So when you're thinking, well, wait a minute, it says I'm supposed to do 12 and now we're going back to 8 and then we're going to go back, or we're staying 12 2 weeks in a row. I think we should go farther. There's a reason she's done that. There's a reason I want you to stick to that schedule. Okay? If you are hurt and you're coming back from an injury, this little tip down here is start at 50% of the previous weekly mileage. That's if you're off a week. That's not if you're off 6 months or 6 weeks or 8 weeks. That's 1 week. So be mindful of this. And please, if you're off for a week with injury or 2 weeks with injury, I'm going to tell you again, but I'll tell you now, I want you to go see the doctor. And people call me all the time and say, what should I do? My first deal is go see your doctor. I told you, go get a doctor that you like and go ask him or her what they think. The second thing is, once you've gotten that all established and you're ready to come back, if you'll work with Hobbit or work with me, we'll modify the schedule to get you caught back up, assuming you haven't been out like I was with periostitis for a really long time. Okay? I mean, a lot of times it's something you can be off a couple weeks, you can rest, and we'll catch you up. We've got a little bit of slack built in just for that. Not miracle workers, I can't like stand on the hands of the clock, but a lot of times if you'll just ask, we can help you do that and help you do it and not get hurt again. Which is the important part for me. Yes, ma'am?
And just the same thing happens. We're in cold and flu season. The same thing can happen. It's not really an injury, but you're out because you're sick.
Right.
And again, be mindful of how you're feeling when you're trying to get back into the schedule.
Yeah.
Particularly if you've been fighting something for
Really
several
good
weeks.
point. Really good point. Intense workouts. Now they're talking about intervals, hills, tempo runs. The only thing we're going to hit you with, if you stay on our schedule, pretty much is going to be hills. And Hobbit is not nearly as aggressive about running hills as I am, and some of you might argue that point, because she seems like finds some hills all the time. But I think by now, haven't we run up Kavanaugh? Have y'all all run up Kavanaugh at least one time? And then run back down, like run up by the Baptist church and on up that way into Hillcrest? I think that's an okay run. Some people think that's a really hilly run. And I just say, if you think that's a hilly run, you should come run hills with me sometime. I took my little group that runs with me, we ran up that way and we ran all the way up into the heights. And on the way back, we started at the state capitol. When we got back, one of the girls said, "You're the only person I know that can run up to the heights, run back to the Capitol, and it's uphill both ways." So hills are kind of about what you want, but again, we're not running you up and down hills 5 times a week, 6 times a week. Hobbit's pretty mindful of, we're going to Maumelle and we're going to run, we ran a relatively flat route out in Maumelle, and she was really nice to all of you. The little bit that we ran back, there were a couple of hills on, you mainly ran downhill, which is something that we don't get to do enough. So again, be mindful of this if you're working with yourself, but if you're working our program, we're trying to make sure that you're not increasing your intensity too quickly. I've already covered this, increased mileage before speed. If you're in the business of your first marathon, if that's what you're about, we're all about increasing mileage and base building, because base building will take you over the finish line. Lots of words here, big deal. The big point of this is you should always alternate hard and easy. If you ran hard today, when you run tomorrow, it should be an easier run. Okay? You can have cross-training days. When you're out and about, you can do some things that give you a rest day, because you can move the days around a little bit when you have to work long or you have to be out of town or something like that. That's a thing that works out. Okay? The other thing, this is not on the slides either, but I want to remind you about something, and that is if the words on your schedule say OFF, they don't mean spray yourself for mosquitoes. It means take the day off. That means don't play tennis, don't go do aerobics. It's not a yoga day. It's not, I'm going to the gym and spin, or I only did 30 minutes on the elliptical, or I went and rode, but I didn't run. Off means off. Take a day off, give your body a break. Because what's going to happen, training days when you work really, really hard and you feel great about that and you're all sweaty and you're all gross and you come back and you're, yes! And then the next day, that off day lets your body build back from that so that resting is training. If you just keep doing that hammer, 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 sooner or later your body will force you to take a day off, and it does that in the form of injury. That's its own little unique way of saying, gotcha. I think even all of us have had some stuff, the very first bullet about everybody has some non-localized, that means just general pain somewhere that seems to come and go all on its own. My toe hurts, my ankle's sore, I feel a little twinge here, a little twinge there. Welcome to running. It's just kind of part of it. The real key is to try to figure out what's something that's just kind of going through, or what's something that really is hurting that I need to stop. Anytime you have a localized sharp pain or a joint, you should stop. Don't try to run through the pain. Walk. If you're training on Saturdays, if you're reasonable, if you're running in the mornings, I'm going to tell you call me, but even during the week, I'll come get you. So if you have to wait for me to get through running and get out of the shower, because I don't look at my phone till then. But I don't mind. But for sure on Saturday on your long run, if you have a pain and you recognize that as being a red flag, that's why I've asked you to A, carry your phone, and B, have mine and Hobbit's number in there, because we'll come get you or send somebody. It's part of our deal. If you have that pain, you can always do some anti-inflammatories, apply some ice, and like I told you earlier, my first deal, you say, well, what should I do, Coach? I'm going to say, go see your doctor and go ask him that question. Tell him it hurts right here when I do that. And please don't take every once in a while you find a doctor says, well, don't do that. Don't run and it won't be a problem. Change doctors. Okay? I don't want to say pet peeve, because it's not a pet peeve, but the one thing I don't want you to do, don't go home, get on the internet, or get in the car and pull out your phone and get on the internet and try to self-diagnose yourself via WebMD or something. You want to spend a lot of time being hurt? That's a good plan. Otherwise, go see your doctor. The other thing that I really strongly discourage is taking anti-inflammatories before you run. If you're having to take a painkiller to run, something is wrong. You need a rest day, you need to go to the doctor, something. If you're having to take some kind of pain reliever to be able to get out there, there's a problem. We talked about this in an earlier meeting. Wear the right shoes. We're up in the mileage now where the shoes that you're wearing are important. And they're a tool, and they need to be fitted to you, and they need to be working for you, and you should kind of already be past that and realize that somewhere 300 to 500 miles on average is when you're going to need to replace them. And you're going to run that much in this training season, so if you're running a marathon, if you got something you like, now's the time. Start planning on getting that second pair that you got in the closet that you can pull out pre-marathon and run in a couple weeks before the race. Okay. They also recommend that if you're coming back from an injury right here, you should replace your shoes. And I know I think that too, but what if the shoe was the cause? I've been injured when the shoe was the cause. And I would have never in a million years got that. But it was one of those, it was bad. We were out on the river trail. Maybe that's why I don't like running the river trail on the Little Rock side. But I had to walk from the opening for Murray Park where the boat ramp is down to the second Murray Park where the bathrooms are because I literally couldn't run anymore. My hip was just whack. When I got home, when you park in our garage, there's like 2 stone steps up into our kitchen. And the way I got up in the kitchen is I put the other leg up there and I reached up with both hands and I pulled myself up through the door because I didn't have enough strength in this leg because it was jacked up. I mean, it was just bad. So I get in and I'm thinking, well, I don't know what happened. I didn't do anything different or anything. And I looked, I'd take my shoes off and set them up on the counter, and one of those shoes literally was sitting like this. One of the gel support system was actually an airbag inside, had blown, and so I was running every step as if I was standing in a pothole this way. My hip didn't like that. Guess what? I threw those shoes away, and that was on a Saturday. By Monday, I was fine. Now, that's a really extreme case. It happened fast, I found it fast, and I was over it fast. But what if your injury came from that in a less degree? A pair of shoes to keep from having that happen again is a pretty cheap price. So it's something to consider. I'm not telling you always have to do it, but you should at least be thinking about it.
Tom?
Yes, ma'am?
The other thing is, a lot of people don't think about, you always look at your running shoes. A lot of people, have work shoes, they have Sunday shoes they wear to church that you may have been wearing for years. And sometimes that's the shoe that is causing the problem. So a lot of times if you start having a nagging pain, don't just look at your running shoes, look at how long you've been wearing those Sunday school shoes since high school. They might need to be repaired or thrown out the door and a new pair run up under them. That's just something else to think about.
Yeah, thanks. And that's a good reminder for me to remind you. I mentioned to you in our equipment meeting that when you're through with a pair of running shoes, if you've got to 300, 400 miles and you've decided, okay, it's time to replace them, there are 2 things you should do with them. One is throw them away or take them, wash them first and take them down and donate them in one of the shoe drives. There's a box at every running store. Because worn out for you might not be worn out for someone who has no shoes. But I promise you this, if they're worn out for you, they're still going to be worn out when you're mowing the yard or working in the flower bed or all the things people tell me that they do with their old running shoes. When they're worn out, get out of them. Be done with them. Go get a new pair and stay them and don't put those on anymore. Because if they were starting to hurt you, my shoes when they go out start hurting me and I can feel it right here. If they're hurting you when you run, they're doing the same thing when you're walking around the flower bed. You just don't notice because you're not running 15,000 steps. But it's still beating that up and you're still paying that price when you go to run the next morning. This slide is all about doing a little bit of variation in your training. It talks about doing some cross training, varying the terrain, like if you get the chance, get off the concrete, go run on a trail, run on the golf course. If you run on concrete, find a place you can run on asphalt. Believe it or not, your body can tell the difference. Asphalt is much softer than concrete. It doesn't seem like it when you're running it, but I promise you, I ran a half marathon on concrete, and I felt like somebody beat me with a 2x4 for about a week. It was tough. It wasn't tough when I was doing it, but I felt bad after that. If you run on a track, change directions every day. The same thing is true if you run the same route from your house, your little 4-mile run or your 6-mile run or 3-mile, whatever you do. If you run it the same every day, most roads in America are built like this. They have a crown in the middle so that when it rains, the water runs off either to the ditch or to the gutter. If you run the same way every time, you're training your body to run in that slope. So if you're going to run that same route every day, that's fine. Change directions. To run on this slope, this leg has got to be a little shorter, this one be a little longer, so your pelvis is going to be like this while you're running. When you change the other side, it'll go this way, so it kind of nets itself out. So not just that bullet says run on the track, but I'm telling you, if you run the same, I used to run this pretty much the same route every day in Maumelle, and you have to do that. Change directions. If you run on a treadmill or in the gym, run on a treadmill one day, then switch it up, get on the elliptical. If you're lucky enough to have a gym that has a thing called the gauntlet, get on the gauntlet a day. I promise you a great cardio workout. You'll love it. You'll cuss me for at least, if you'll do it, you won't do it for longer than 10 minutes or 15 minutes your first time, and I promise you'll be cussing when you get done. So you'll like it if you're like me and you like doing that kind of stuff.